Tanya Van Quellenberg was born on March 7, 1969, in Victoria, British Columbia. Raised in a warm and caring home with her parents, Willem and Jean Van Quellenborg, Tanya had a blissful childhood filled with joy alongside her older brother, John. The family shared a passion for adventure, frequently embarking on lengthy boating excursions across the stunning Salish Sea, creating treasured memories. Tanya particularly enjoyed sailing and playing melodies on her guitar, and she also loved hitting tennis balls on their expansive Woodacre property. She was a determined student who advocated for a girls' basketball team at her high school, showing her passion for equality and sports. Tanya had a soft spot for animals and longed for a furry companion. Finally, in 1982, her mother gave in and a golden retriever named Tessa joined the family, becoming Tanya's faithful and beloved pet. Tanya dreamed of working with animals, possibly as a veterinarian. Jay Rollincook was born in December 16, 1966 in Saanich, British Columbia. He grew up in a warm, close-knit family with two loving sisters, Laura Lee and Kelly, and their parents Gordon and Leona Cook. Standing at an impressive height of 6'4", Jay possessed a lanky frame at 20 and had yet to fully develop into his adult physique. Jay was not just an ordinary young man from Vancouver Island. He had a passion for music and had mastered playing the bass guitar, rocking out with his friends. He was working at a pizza parlor and was known for his dedication. Once, he biked through rain and darkness for 3 long hours while balancing a whole pizza just to surprise his friends staying at a cabin. However, Jay had a peculiar quirk of misplacing his clothes and often returned home without his jacket, feeling puzzled about its whereabouts. He possessed a heart of gold and frequently treated his younger sister to special outings, like dinners and high tea, using the hard-earned money he made at the pizza parlor. He aspired to become a marine biologist. Jay and Tanya's paths crossed in the halls of Oak Bay High School, igniting a connection that would shape their lives. Despite being 2 years older than her, Jay was captivated by Tanya's charm. By May 1987, with Tanya on the brink of graduation, their friendship blossomed into a romance. Although their future plans were not set in stone, their dreams held the promise of a meaningful and exciting future. Through it all, the young couple radiated happiness, earning the admiration of their family who saw the love they shared. Their relationship had spanned only 6 beautiful months when tragedy befell and snatched away the young couple's promising future together. On the chilly morning of November 18, 1987, Jay woke up excited about picking up his girlfriend, Tanya, and embarking on a road trip from British Columbia to Seattle in his father's shiny copper-brown 1977 Ford Club van. Jay's father, Gordon, who ran his own business, required furnace parts worth $750 from Genesco Heating in Seattle. He asked Jay to collect the parcel from Seattle as it was already going there with Tanya. The couple got ready for their cross-border road trip, excited about the long hours they would spend in each other's company. Tanya also packed her camera, a Minolta X700 with a 35mm lens, hoping to capture some memorable photos of their time together. After a smooth ferry ride on the MV Coho from Victoria to Port Angeles on the Washington coast, Jay and Tanya continued their journey along Route 101 toward Bremerton. However, they accidentally missed the exit of the Hood Canal floating bridge and found themselves in the charming town of Hoodsport by 8 p.m. Seeking guidance, they entered Hoodsport Grocery where they encountered a friendly store clerk named Judith Stone who helped them with directions. As the evening unfolded, Jay and Tanya continued their journey and arrived at the peaceful town of Align. They stopped at Ben's Deli Mart for some food at 9:29 p.m. The friendly clerk at the deli noted that the couple appeared calm and relaxed, traveling without any companions. It was late in the evening, well past 10 p.m., when Jay and Tanya finally reached Bremerton and purchased a ferry ticket to Seattle for the next day. Their plan was to find a suitable spot to park their van and spend the night before continuing their journey the next morning to collect the parcel. The next day, November 19, 1987, they boarded the ferry from Bremerton to Seattle, ready to continue their adventure. However, destiny had something unexpected in store for them, as this was the last time they were seen. They never reached Genesco Heating to pick up the parcel. They were scheduled to return home that same evening, but to the dismay of their families, they never arrived. Tanya's older brother, John Van Queilenborg, was away at college when he received an alarming phone call from their concerned father, Willem. Tanya and Jay had not returned home and had not called to inform of any change in plans. This unusual silence worried both families, who knew Tanya and Jay were responsible young people and would always call if they were going to be late. Despite their growing concern, their parents clung to the hope that the van had broken down and left the couple stranded without access to a phone. As the morning of November 20th arrived without any word from Tanya and Jay, a wave of panic washed over their families. The unsettling silence drove them to report their beloved children as missing. This sparked a massive search operation, as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police contacted the Seattle Police Department about the missing couple. Determined families went to great lengths and even hired a plane to soar above the area where Tanya and Jay had last been seen, hoping for a glimpse of their van amid the vast expanse. For the investigators, the search for Jay and Tanya was like unraveling a complex puzzle. With no trace of the couple and no clues to guide them, the police faced a challenging task. Step by step, they retraced the path Jay and Tanya had taken, reconstructing their trip to try and unlock the secrets behind their sudden disappearance. After nearly a week of uncertainty, fate dealt a devastating blow. On November 24, 1987, a passerby gathering cans in Skagit County stumbled upon a heart-wrenching scene. Beside a weathered culvert along Parson Creek Road, some 80 miles north of Seattle, laid the lifeless body of Tanya Van Queilenborg. She was found unclothed from the waist down. The shocking cause of death was soon uncovered. A single gunshot to the back of her head, inflicted with a .38 caliber bullet. That evening, with a heavy heart, John took the somber responsibility of identifying his sister's lifeless form. As Chief Deputy Ron Panzaro of the Skagit County Sheriff's Office described, Tanya's body was found with the distressing signs of a violent attack. A trace of another person's DNA was recovered from inside her body. During the investigation, a dedicated volunteer named Jennifer Sheehan Lee discovered a shell casing from a .38 caliber bullet not far from Prairie Road. Along the road, the officers found plastic ties, commonly used for bundling wires, which they believed were used to restrain Tanya in the van. As the investigation deepened, the detectives couldn't ignore the puzzling absence of Jay in the van. Their suspicion immediately turned toward Jay as a potential suspect in Tanya's tragic murder. However, both families vehemently disagreed with this notion, as they knew Tanya and Jay were intensely devoted to each other and deeply in love. Their relationship had been filled with joy and had never exhibited any signs of trouble or violence. On November 25, 1987, a day after Tanya's body was found, a perplexing discovery shed new light on the case. The authorities located Jay's van in a bustling parking lot in downtown Bellingham, in Whatcom County, 90 miles north from Seattle. The detectives scoured the surrounding area and stumbled upon a treasure trove of evidence just 2 blocks away from the van. Tanya's wallet, ID card, driving license, the van's keys, and most importantly, a box of bullets that seemed to be of .38 caliber had been discarded near the Greyhound station in Bellingham, approximately 16 miles from where Tanya's body had been found. Curiously, these items were found hidden beneath the porch of a local tavern named Essie's, adjacent to the busy Greyhound bus station. Inside the van, they made a series of unsettling discoveries. They found zip ties and Tanya's black pants, which raised their suspicions. The money order for Genesco was still inside, and used. A stained comforter and a used tampon were evidence of a distressing struggle. The presence of orange Camel cigarette butts in an ashtray hinted at a connection to a third person and possible killer in the van, since Tanya and Jay never smoked. Authorities also found a pair of surgical gloves that they believed the killer had donned to avoid leaving behind any telltale fingerprints. Also in the van were various receipts, including the ferry ticket from Bremerton to Seattle, confirming that Jay and Tanya had indeed taken the second ferry as a part of their journey. There was a fuel receipt indicating that the couple had stopped to purchase fuel along the road, between Port Angeles and Bremerton. These findings provided valuable clues and helped the investigators piece together the timeline of their travels. However, one significant item was missing: the Minolta X 735mm camera that Tanya had brought along their journey. Tragically, on November 26, 1987, a group of pheasant hunters made a grim discovery. The lifeless body of Jay Cook concealed under the majestic high bridge, overlooking the Snoqualmie River in Snohomish County. His head and torso were carefully covered with a blue blanket, and investigators who gently unveiled the blanket were met by a horrifying sight. Jay had suffered severe head injuries from a beating, and his life had been cruelly cut short by strangulation with twine tied to 2 vivid red dog collars. On top of that, a pack of Camel lights and some tissues had been forcefully pushed down his throat. Sergeant Robert Bart from the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office noted that Jay's hands had been bound with plastic ties, similar to the ones found near Tanya's body, which is often a sign of an individual with a criminal past. What added to the intrigue was the location where Jay's body had been found, in Monroe Honor Farm, just a few miles away from Monroe Correctional Prison. Detective Jim Scharf of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office had a sinking feeling that the perpetrator could be a seasoned predator, even a serial killer. The search for the double murder posed a daunting challenge to investigators and forensic scientists. The 4 crime scenes were spread across 3 counties: Saget, Sagamihsh, and Whatcom. A small glimmer of hope emerged when the bullet casing discovered near Tanya's body was found to match the bullets recovered at the tavern in Bellingham. Unfortunately, the murder weapon used to shoot Tanya remained elusive. Among the various leads that were found at the crime scene were blood-stained rocks that investigators had meticulously collected from the surrounding grass where Jay's body had been found. Forensics also discovered a palm print on the back of the van, which they hoped belonged to the killer. In their search for clues, the police focused on the black pants found in the van. They sent the pants to the medical examiner's office for analysis, hoping to uncover a new lead. Upon examination, forensic experts found traces of bodily fluid on the pants. More significantly, the DNA profile obtained from the bodily fluid did not match Jay's, but it did match the unknown DNA recovered from inside Tanya's body. Investigators believe that this mysterious DNA sample was their link to the murderer. Referred to as Individual A, the investigation faced a significant challenge as the only evidence leaking all 4 crime scenes were the plastic zip ties discovered near Tanya's and Jay's bodies, as well as under the porch and inside the van. Detective Scharf believed these zip ties were part of the killer's sinister toolkit for committing his heinous acts. Tanya and Jay, described as a mild-mannered and soft-spoken, were not seeking conflict with anyone. The devastating impact of their loss was felt deeply by both families. In a desperate attempt to bring the killer to justice, Tanya's family offered a reward of $50,000 for any valuable information. Although tips poured in from far and wide, none of them yielded the breakthrough they were hoping for. On December 5, 1987, a heartfelt memorial service took place at the University of Victoria's Interfaith Chapel, honoring the memory of Jay and Tanya. Just 4 weeks after the murders, during the Christmas holidays in December 1987, Jay and Tanya's families received the first of a series of chilling greeting cards by an anonymous writer. These cards were filled with disturbing descriptions of the murders and signed by someone claiming to be their killer. Some of these cards were even signed with the names of the victims as Tanya and Jay. Even more unsettling was that the cards were sent from different cities across the United States, including New York, Los Angeles, and Seattle. The writer of these cards went to the extent of sending letters to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and a British Columbia newspaper, seemingly finding joy in causing distress and chaos. The already grieving families were further shattered by this terrifying turn of events. Detectives suspected that the author might be a transient traveling along the West Coast, but the grammar and punctuation in the letters hinted at a Canadian education. Phrases like greetings and salutations and hallelujah, bloody Jesus, caught their attention. As the investigation progressed, authorities worked diligently to collect evidence and conduct DNA tests in the laboratory. They also made a public plea to the letter writer, urging him to provide information about the whereabouts of the lay, where he claimed to have left his car during the crimes. While there was a possibility that the letter writer could be the killer, detectives believed it was more likely the work of a misguided individual. This was confirmed when the DNA extracted from one such letter failed to match the individual DNA from the crime scene. In 1995, a dedicated cold case team led by Snohomish County Detective Jim Scharf was formed with a mission to provide long-awaited justice for grieving families. One of these cases that caught their attention was the double murder of Tanya and Jay. It was then that a new name emerged for a potential suspect, Charles Thurman Sinclair. Charles Sinclair was a notorious figure in western United States, earning the chilling nickname of the coin shop killer. His criminal activities were not typically thefts, but rather the calculated actions of a serial killer who targeted coin dealers and shop owners. Throughout the 1980s-1990s, Sinclair terrorized the region, leaving a trail of fear in his wake. The complexity of his crimes initially led investigators to treat them as separate incidents in different states. However, a survivor's description eventually connected the crimes, prompting investigators from multiple states to collaborate and bring the coin shop killer to justice. Sinclair was finally arrested in Alaska in 1990, prompted by a survivor's description, but passed away later that year from a heart attack. Sinclair was suspected of being involved in 11 homicides, but his sudden death meant that the true extent of his crimes could never be revealed. The detectives working on Jay and Tanya's cold case initially believed he might be connected to the double murder, given the circumstances of the killing in 1987. However, unlike other serial killers, Sinclair's motive was primarily financial gain by targeting coin shops and dealers for money. In Tanya and Jay's case, all the money they had been carrying, including Tanya's wallet and the money order in the van, had been left untouched. The detectives then dismissed this theory and began looking elsewhere for clues. For more than 20 years, the murder of the Canadian couple remained a puzzle. In 2003, forensic scientist Lisa Collins from the Washington State Patrol joined the investigation and decided to use modern technology to uncover new leads. She focused on analyzing the DNA profile known as Individual A, which was obtained from bodily fluid found at the crime scene. Collins uploaded this profile to CODIS, the FBI's National Offender Database, hoping to find a match. Despite her thorough analysis in the efforts, the database did not provide any matches at that time. Despite the DNA mismatch between Individual A and the letter writer, the police considered the writer as a suspect and wanted him to come forward in case he had some information. A breakthrough occurred when a Canadian resident recognized the handwriting while watching the TV show Washington's Most Wanted and contacted the police anonymously. The tipster provided the suspect's name, which was found in the case files through a database search. Detectives tracked down the transient suspect on October 20th, 2010, who apologized and cited mental illness and years of homelessness as reasons for his erratic behavior. Years passed with no breakthrough in the case, leaving the detectives frustrated. Then in 2018, Detective Jim Scharf learned about snapshot phenotyping, a new tool that used DNA evidence to predict a suspect's physical appearance. Working with Parabon Nanolabs, they analyzed the DNA samples from Individual A and created composite sketches of the suspect at the ages of 25, 45, and 65. Despite releasing the sketches to the public and receiving almost 70 leads, none provided a solid clue or name, but a surprising arrest in California that same year offered a glimmer of hope for law enforcement. A dangerous criminal who went by various names, such as the Visala Ransacker, the Original Night Stalker, and the Diamond Knot Killer, had been causing fear and terror in California for a long time. Spread across 15 different areas, his crimes amounted to more than 50 assaults and 13 murders. He became known as the Golden State Killer and haunted people like an invisible phantom for over 4 decades. The detectives considered the possibility that Tanya and Jay might have been victims of this notorious killer, but the evidence from the crime scene and the killer's methods were different from those linked to the Golden State Killer. In 2018, the Golden State Killer finally ran out of luck in evading capture. Using a genetic database called GED-Match, investigators identified Joseph James D'Angelo Jr. as the Golden State Killer, even though he had previously been ruled out as a suspect. This arrest inspired Detective Jim Scharf to consider using the same technology in his investigation. In 2013, Chelsea Rustad, a 31-year-old resident of Tumwater in Washington, began exploring her family history and connected with distant relatives on social media. She identified the Talbot siblings from Snohomish County as her second cousins and got in touch with the two sisters online. but their brother was absent from social media. In 2015, she entered an ancestry DNA contest by submitting a photo of herself at age 5, dressed as a ballerina on Halloween. That photo must have been a lucky charm because out of 100 of entries, Chelsea won a free DNA test kit and posted her results on GeneMatch, a DNA database website. Little did she know, a new story was unfolding in the police forensic department as she spent time on the site. In 2018, Parabon Nanolabs uploaded individual A's DNA to GeneMatch, seeking answers in Jay and Tanya's case. C.C. Moore, a genetic genealogist, took on the challenge. The case held personal significance for her, as she was born the same year as Tanya and felt determined to bring closure to their murder mystery. After a tense night on April 27, 2018, C.C. found 2 individuals in the DNA database who shared enough DNA with individual A to qualify as second cousins. However, they were related to him on different branches of his family tree. C.C. had to trace those branches back to identify the common ancestor and uncover individual A's identity. Her determination increasing with every second, C.C. uncovered a web of connections and found a unique name among the cousins. Within 2 hours, she built the family tree and discovered the suspect's name. When the police arrived at the cousin's address, they knew they were in the right place. The door opened to reveal Chelsea Rustad, and the suspect was none other than her mysterious second cousin, William Earl Talbot II, who had no presence on social media. William Earl Talbot II was born in 1969 to William Earl Talbot Sr. and Patricia Peters. William had a regular job as a trucker and enjoyed riding motorcycles and socializing with friends. He lived in a pleasant home near Seattle-Tacoma Airport and had a clean record except for a few minor arrests. From a young age, he displayed anger issues and aggressive behavior. Talbot's younger sister, Melina Grail, recalled incidents where he had kicked her with boots on and exhibited entitled behavior. She also mentioned an incident from when Talbot was 11 years old and had allegedly pushed their disabled father. Despite counseling, his behavior did not improve. As Talbot grew older, his behavior became increasingly violent. At 16 years old, he expressed his intention to run over his father with a car. He assaulted his sister Inga multiple times, once when she was 11 and again when she turned 15, causing serious injuries, including a broken tailbone. Talbot also dropped the family cat into a well, requiring his father to retrieve it and clean the well. Due to his violent actions, Talbot became estranged from his family for nearly 2 decades. Ignoring their attempts to reach out to him, he even neglected important events, such as his mother's funeral, and only sporadically contacted his family on special occasions. Despite his clean record, the police had finally caught up to the killer, and all evidence was pointing directly at William Earl Talbot II. For years, he managed to stay unnoticed, living a regular life as a truck driver, without any online footprint, but now his true identity was unraveling. Detectives discovered that Talbot had grown up just a few miles away from Jay Cook's body was found, a crucial connection. Detective Scharf faced a critical task. He had to make sure that DNA found at the crime scene belonged to William Talbot. To gather evidence, investigators closely followed Talbot on his trucking routes until an opportunity arose. One fateful day, May 2018, Talbot unknowingly dropped a cup he had been drinking from at a traffic signal and drove away. Racing against time, investigators promptly delivered the cup to the Washington State Patrol Lab. With anticipation building, everyone held their breath, awaiting the results that would either confirm or dispel their suspicions. The State Crime Lab swiftly tested the cup and confirmed the detectives' suspicions. Talbot's DNA matched the evidence from the crime scenes. Detective Scharf was in disbelief upon hearing the news, feeling a rush of emotions. After nearly 3 decades of anguish and years of relentless work, they had the killer at last. On May 17, 2018, around 6 p.m., William Talbot II was arrested. He was charged for kidnapping, assault, murder, and robbery in Saget County Superior Court for the death of Tanya Van Queilenberg. Later, on June 15, 2018, the charge for Jay Cook's murder was added in Snohomish County Superior Court, as confirmed by Snohomish County Sheriff Ty Trinery. The trial of William Talbot began on June 11, 2019 in Sonoma County Superior Court. He pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of aggravated murder. Deputy Prosecutor Matt Baldock presented DNA evidence, Talbot's proximity to the crime scene, and the presence of zip ties as evidence against him. However, Talbot's defense attorneys, Rachel Ford and John Scott, worked to challenge the DNA evidence and create doubt in the jury's minds. They argue that the DNA evidence was not strong enough to prove Talbot's guilt. During the trial, Dr. Eric Kiesel, a former medical examiner, showed autopsy photos of Jay Cook highlighting his suffering. However, the defense pointed out that Kiesel had previously estimated a longer time of death, raising questions about the timeline. Kiesel clarified that the estimate was not based on solid evidence. Talbot's former roommate, Michael Seat, testified about their friendship and shared memories of snorkeling and doing photography together. As the trial unfolded, another former roommate, Timothy McPherson, came forward and described Talbot as heavy and strong, mentioning that they used to go bowling together. McPherson also stated that he had never seen Talbot with guns, blue blankets, dog collars, or zip ties, and had never seen him smoke. These testimonies conflicted with the prosecution's evidence of Talbot's history of aggressive behavior. The trial grew tense when Talbot's defense team claimed that the detectives had tunnel vision and had overlooked the possibility of another person leaving the DNA evidence at the crime scene. Prosecutor Mark Baldock countered by questioning the plausibility of certain scenarios presented by the defense. Another point of contention was the palm print found on the Ford van's back door, which was initially deemed a mismatch for Talbot, but later identified as a match. The defense questioned the timing of this chart, but did not challenge the final conclusion in court. The defense also suggested the idea of a consensual relationship between Talbot and Tanya as the reason for his DNA at the crime scene, and argued that the unidentified killer had later murdered the couple without leaving any DNA behind. But Talbot denied having any relationship with Tanya, leaving the jurors puzzled about his true intentions and struggling to understand how the evidence fit together. Finally, after just 30 minutes of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous guilty verdict, sealing Talbot's fate. Their decision was solely based on the concrete evidence presented by the prosecution in court. Later, during a private meeting with the lawyers, the jury learned that the zip ties found in the victim's van also contained DNA traces that potentially matched Talbot's DNA, providing further proof against him. On July 24, 2019, William Talbot II was sentenced, concluding a groundbreaking trial where a jury found him guilty of homicide. Despite a last-minute attempt by his defense team for a new trial, the judge dismissed their argument, emphasizing the importance of considering evidence in a broader context. Jay Cook's sister also took the stand to highlight Talbot's role in ending the lives of 2 young people. The judge sentenced Talbot to life in prison without parole, despite the defense attorney's statement about his unremarkable life and perceived lack of cruelty. Tanya's close friend expressed satisfaction with the verdict, but acknowledged the lasting sorrow of losing Tanya to such unspeakable violence. In 2020, Talbot filed an appeal, arguing against the use of DNA evidence in his case. He wrote, "Based on Snohomish County's way of thinking, the only possible suspect is the source of that blood, regardless of all other evidence or lack of." He claimed that the DNA alone should not make someone the only possible suspect, disregarding other evidence. On December 6, 2021, concerns were raised about a juror's ability to remain impartial due to emotional influences. Talbot's defense team appealed, claiming bias in an unfair trial. The appeals court agreed, stating that the jurors' comments showed actual bias and had not been addressed adequately. The prosecution vehemently opposed the court's decision to overturn Talbot's conviction. As their argument was unsuccessful, the case was taken to the Supreme Court, which upheld the original decision and reinstated Talbot's conviction on December 22, 2022. As a result, Talbot will serve his life sentence without parole at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Chelsea Rustad, Talbot's second cousin, found closure as she connected with the families of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Quellenberg. Attending the sentencing, she offered support to the families and noted the absence of Talbot's relatives. Rustad wrote a book titled inherited secrets about the experience of discovering her relation to a cold-blooded killer. Talbot's conviction brought a sense of closure to the families, providing them with peace after decades of pain and uncertainty. The double murder of Tanya and Jay Cook was a case that tested boundaries of forensic science. What are your thoughts on this case? Before we proceed, I've got an exciting surprise for you. We've launched a brand new channel dedicated to intriguing content such as old historical mysteries, cold cases, and particularly chilling horror stories perfect for bedtime. Drop a comment letting us know if you're a fan of horror stories or not. You can find the link in the description below. Let's find out who will be the first to explore it. Alright, let's dive back into the video. On December 20th, 1976, 14-year-old Kenneth Jumper Jr. was walking along the Lehigh River in East Side, Pennsylvania, Carbon County, around 4:30 p.m. He was accustomed to this area from his trapping activities. This time, however, he noticed something he hadn't seen the previous week: a suitcase. Nearby, he saw something horrifying: a human head with dark hair. He rushed home to inform his 19-year-old brother, Richard, and together they contacted the Pennsylvania police. A total of 3 suitcases, all spray-painted black, were found at the scene. They had contained the remains of a young woman and the nearly full-term female fetus she had been carrying. Investigators believed that the woman's killer had thrown the suitcases from the bridge that carried Interstate 80 over the river. He or she may have intended for them to go into the river, but they instead hit the ground, causing at least one of them to open up. The young woman had been strangled and shot once in the neck. She had been with the pieces, some of which were badly mutilated, then placed into the luggage. Her unborn child had been removed from her womb and also placed in one of the suitcases. The young woman's initial autopsy estimated that she had died sometime between December 17th and December 20th, but police would later say that they believed she was killed within 24 hours of her discovery on 20th. Pages from the Northern New Jersey edition of the September 26, 1976 Sunday Daily News were found inside of the suitcases, as was a piece of chenille fabric that could have come from a robe or a blanket. The young woman was believed to be Caucasian and in her late teens or early 20s. She was estimated to have been approximately 5 feet 4 inches tall and 150 pounds. Her killer had cut off her nose and ears, but a sketch of what she may have looked like in life was developed and circulated. Authorities could not match her with a missing persons report or find anyone who recognized the sketch, and without an identity for their victim, their investigation into her murder stalled. The unidentified remains were preserved at the city morgue in Philadelphia for almost 7 years until August of 1983, when they were returned to Carbon County. A local pastor over the interment of the unknown woman and her child in the Carbon County Potter's Field, now known as the Lorrytown Road Cemetery near Weatherly, Pennsylvania. Their simple grave marker read simply Beth Doe. Since the young woman's identity was unknown and her family could not be informed of her final resting place, local residents took up the responsibility of visiting the grave and leaving flowers there in their place. In addition to becoming an adopted member of the Carbon County community, the young woman known only as Beth Doe also garnered national attention, with individuals from all over the country following the case and suggesting possible identities of the young woman. Police remained dedicated to the case even as years went on without an identification, utilizing new technologies to try to give Beth Doe back her name as they became available. In the decades that followed her death, isotope analysis, more advanced facial reconstructions, and DNA were all used to try to identify her. Her remains were exhumed in 2007 to collect more forensic evidence for testing. Missing women were investigated to see if they could be Beth Doe, but they were all ultimately excluded. More than 4 decades would pass before answers were found in the case, but when they finally came, the identities of both Beth Doe and her killer would be discovered. On March 31st, 2021, 63-year-old Luis Sierra, a married father of 2, was arrested at his home in the Ozark Park neighborhood of Queens, New York, and charged with 1 count of criminal homicide. He was arraigned in Queens Criminal Court and held without bail, pending his extradition back to Pennsylvania. Sierra's arrest came as a shock to his neighbors, who could not imagine him committing such a crime. They spoke to the New York Daily News about how kind he was and how they felt as though he were a part of their families. Sierra had been 19 years old when Beth Doe was killed. Pennsylvania State Police announced that they had also been able to finally identify her. She was Evelyn Colon of Jersey City, New Jersey, who had been just 15 years old at the time of her murder. Evelyn was one of 5 children, described by one of her brothers as a sweetheart who was somewhat of a mama's girl. She became pregnant around the time she turned 15 and moved into an apartment with his father, Louis Sierra, who had been her family's neighbor. Sierra was abusive and jealous and sometimes locked Evelyn inside of their apartment. Evelyn told her mother that if anything happened to her, Sierra was involved. Evelyn remained in close contact with her family after she moved out. One day in mid-December of 1976, she told her mother that she was not feeling well. When her mother went to the apartment shared with her boyfriend to bring her soup, Evelyn was not there, and she was told by neighbors that the couple had moved out. In January of 1977, Evelyn's family received a letter stating that she had given birth to a 9-pound baby boy she named after his father and was living in Connecticut, which was where the letter had been postmarked. The letter further stated that she would reach out to her family should she need anything. It is widely reported in the media that Colon family did not report her missing because of this letter. However, PA Homepage, who interviewed one of Evelyn's brothers and one of her nephews, reports that they did try to report her missing, but police would not take a report because of the letter. Due to a house fire, the Colons were left without even pictures of Evelyn to look at in her absence. Evelyn's family desperately wanted to find her. Being without Evelyn, even if it was because she had willingly gone off to start a new life with her boyfriend and new baby, was devastating to her mother. She would walk around Jersey City looking for Evelyn and sit inside of her home looking out her window at people passing on the street to see if any of them could be her daughter. The final words she said before she died were to her son, "Find Evelyn." The family did look for Evelyn, especially they had access to the internet, using it for research and messaging people they believed they could be related to through Evelyn, whose profiles they found on social media. Evelyn's nephew, Luis Colon Jr., was not born until 7 years after his aunt went missing. He grew up hearing stories about her and hoping that she really had built a happy life with her child somewhere outside of Jersey City. Around 2017, he decided to try to use his DNA to try to reconnect with his long-lost aunt and cousin. He ordered DNA test kits from several commercial DNA companies, believing his chances of success would be greater if he used multiple services and their respective databases. He hoped that either Evelyn or her child had their DNA tested and put in one of these databases and that the family could be reunited with them. When he received his results, however, he was only matched to very distant cousins in the various databases. In March of 2021, however, he was and found him as a close familial match. The Colon and found him as a close familial match. The Colons knew that Evelyn was the only person it could be, which authorities confirmed with their cooperation. Luis was disappointed with this outcome as his goal in uploading his DNA was to be reunited with his aunt and cousin. He and the rest of Evelyn's family were horrified to learn that both she and her daughter were dead and that they had been killed in such a brutal fashion. They are trying to find some peace in finally having answers and knowing that Evelyn had not vanished from their lives willingly. Evelyn's family has named her daughter Emily Grace Colon. Evelyn's 2 sisters believe she had planned during pregnancy to use the name Emily if her baby was a girl, and they felt the name Grace would honor the grace of God. The Colons view the timing of Evelyn's identification as fortuitous in light of her life and their faith. Evelyn's identification was announced just weeks before what would have been her 60th birthday on April 17th and just days before Easter, which was on April 4th. I think that, in light of the whole Easter season, with the Christ's resurrection, her identity, her case, her life, the justice for her murder, is being truly resurrected from her grave, right? And it's a powerful season for us as a family, said Evelyn's niece Miriam Colon Beltman. Evelyn's family now lives throughout the country and are working to travel to Pennsylvania in spite of financial constraints and travel restrictions. They have started a GoFundMe so that they can all visit Evelyn and Emily's grave and further memorialize them. The Colons also went to visit the area so that they can meet the community that has embraced Evelyn and Emily while they were lost to them. Carbon County adopted her. It's incredible. You all kept her memory alive, knowing about her and praying for her. That's so powerful, that this county was praying for my family, and how you loved someone you didn't know. We're so thankful for all of you. You're all family now, too, said Evelyn's niece, Miriam. While Luis Sierra has been charged and arrested, authorities are still building their case against him and hope that there are witnesses who can provide more details about the case. The Pennsylvania State Police, along with the Carbon County District Attorney's Office, have set up a tip line in conjunction with Crime Stoppers and ask anyone with information to come forward. Authorities had gone to Sierra's home the week before his arrest, and he had claimed to not know Evelyn at all. When they continued to press the issue, he eventually admitted to dating her and getting her pregnant. He said she had threatened to leave him in the past, so when he came home to their apartment in Jersey City one day and she was gone, he had assumed she went to live with her mother and moved back in with his father shortly thereafter. He eventually admitted to mailing the letter received by Evelyn's family while he and Evelyn were on a day trip in Connecticut to look at apartments, but had no explanation as to why the letter was not mailed until well after Evelyn's death. He is next due in court in New York on May 17th. While they are grateful for the answers they now have and for Sierra's arrest, Evelyn's family is aware that there is still a lot of work to be done to get them the full story of what happened to Evelyn and to get Evelyn justice. Let me tell you something. I can't wait for him to come to Pennsylvania because I want to look at his eyes and ask him why. Evelyn's brother, Luis Colon Sr., said of Sierra after his arrest. While the family is grateful he is in custody, they know he is not considered guilty until he pleads guilty or is convicted. Until then, I'm not going to rest because, to me, the mission is not done, Evelyn's nephew, Luis Colon Jr. said. We got her name. That's important. And we got the word out. But now we have to get some justice here. 32-year-old Lauren Colden Thompson was the single mother of 3 children, ages 3, 5, and 9, at the beginning of 2019. On the afternoon of January 10th, she was spending time with a group of friends in Panola County, Texas, after reportedly going fishing earlier in the day. Just before 2 p.m. that afternoon, Lauren called her mother, Tori Colden, sounding anxious. She asked to speak to her children, but they could not come to the phone at that time. Tori believed she heard someone arguing with her daughter in the background. Lauren apologized for previous behavior and told her mother that if she ever got out of this, she would never do drugs again. Tori asked Lauren if she was in trouble and advised her to call the local authorities if she were. Lauren told her mother she loved her, asked her to tell her father that she loved him and that she was sorry before hanging up. The 7-minute-long phone call ended right at 2 o'clock. 8 minutes later, Lauren called 911. She sounded panicked and told the dispatcher that she was being chased. The call lasted for more than 20 minutes before abruptly ending. Authorities could not get Lauren back on the phone despite repeated efforts and believed that her cell phone must have run out of battery. Lauren had provided the dispatcher with her location and authorities were quick to respond to the scene. They found Lauren's vehicle along an oil and gas lease road off of County Road 267 at FM 1794, just west of the Rock Creek community, stuck in a muddy ditch. When they arrived at the nearby home of the man who had been driving in the vehicle with Lauren, he was there, getting his own vehicle to bring back to the scene to pull Lauren's car out of the ditch. He told them that they had been driven off the road by another car. Paint transfer on Lauren's vehicle supported this claim. He had told Lauren to stay with her car while he walked home to get his vehicle and some chains to pull her car out of the ditch. Later that evening, authorities also located one of Lauren's shoes. Between the location of the vehicle, where they found the shoe, and the pings from Lauren's cell phone during her 911 call, they were able to approximate the path Lauren took as she ran away from her car. The initial search for her lasted all night, but Lauren was not found. In the months following Lauren's disappearance, authorities searched more than 2,000 acres of land on the ground and 9,000 acres from the air with helicopters and drones over the course of multiple searches. Large sections of the search area were wooded, making them difficult to search. Furthermore, there was extensive flooding in the area at the time Lauren disappeared, making certain places impossible to search until months after she went missing. All-terrain vehicles and search dogs were brought in to help with the searches, which received Texas Rangers and the FBI have provided resources to the investigation. The 3 individuals Lauren was known to be with on the day she disappeared have been interviewed and taken polygraph examinations. One of them passed away in the months after Lauren went missing. In the first few months following Lauren's disappearance, there were some disagreements between her family and law enforcement. Lauren's parents, Tori and G.W. Colon, have been very active in looking for their daughter and had hoped to organize further searches for her. However, so far, only members of law enforcement have participated in searches, and the Colons were told at one point that this was in part because the area surrounding where Lauren vanished was all private property and the owners wanted to control who had access to their land. However, according to Tori Colon, the owners of the property were in fact willing to help with further searches with volunteers from outside of law enforcement. There are, of course, other concerns authorities have about volunteer searches. We had a lot of local people offering to search too. Not that we don't appreciate that, and there's times that that's utilized, but when we have teams that are available to come that are used to dealing with and trained to deal with crime scenes, and we have the potential to have a crime scene. Obviously, that's who we want on the ground so we don't contaminate everything, said Panola County Sheriff Kevin Lake. The Panola County Sheriff's Office has denied requests from the media to release the recording of the 911 call Lauren made, as they believe it contains information important to their investigation. Joey Ortega, a private investigator working on the case with the Colons and acting as their spokesperson, was allowed to listen to the tape and agrees with this decision. Lauren's parents were also allowed to listen to the recording. According to Tori Colon, while her daughter sounded anxious when she spoke to her just prior to her disappearance, she sounded coherent and not as terrified as she sounded during the 911 call. While authorities initially believed the 911 call ended abruptly because Lauren's cell phone battery died, further investigation has shown that the phone, in fact, continued to ping after the call ended. The final ping occurred 20 minutes after the 911 call ended. Tori Cole then has also stated after hearing the recording that at the end of the call, it sounded like Lauren had been startled by someone. According to Joey Ortega, the fact that the phone continued to ping along with that data showing that the call ended nowhere near any river or place where one was likely to run into a wild animal, along with her claim that she was being chased, all lends to a reasonable belief that she was in fact kidnapped and not lost, drowned, or attacked by an animal. Sheriff Leake says his office has not yet found solid evidence confirming that foul play is involved in Lauren's disappearance and will not rule that foul play is involved until such evidence is found. We can speculate, but it's not our job to speculate. We're fact finders, and so we have not collected any evidence to make us confirm that foul play is involved, he said in February of 2020. Could there be foul play involved? Absolutely. And that's why we're so concerned about preserving behind her children. Lauren's family initially offered a $5,000 reward for information in the case and doubled that reward to $10,000 in June of 2020. They also announced the creation of a tip line which would allow individuals to call in or text information about the case while remaining anonymous and avoiding direct contact with law enforcement. In the press release announcing this information, the family said that they hoped that through their independent efforts and working in concert with law enforcement, they can get a clear picture of what happened to Lauren that January afternoon. Before we continue, 90% of you haven't subscribed to our channel, so if you like this video, please subscribe. It motivates us to make more content for you. Okay, let's continue. Amanda Grudge was born in the United Kingdom in 1964 and moved to the United States before she was a year old. After living in several states, Amanda's mother Sylvia left Amanda's father and took Amanda with her to Canada. Amanda was shy as a child but grew into a determined and independent adult. On the evening of August 21, 1991, 27-year-old Amanda was at the apartment she shared with her mother on Enfield Place in Mississauga, Ontario. She had several piercings in each of her ears and was having trouble removing one of her earrings as she was getting ready to go out for the evening. Sylvia had to help her daughter remove it. Amanda then left the apartment for the night, taking just a purse with her. She never came home. Amanda would sometimes spend a night or two at a friend's home, so Sylvia did not immediately panic when she was not home the following morning. Once several days went by with no sign of Amanda, however, she knew something was wrong and went to the police. The police did not take the disappearance seriously and may not have investigated it at all. When the Ontario Provincial Police began investigating the case years later, no missing persons file on Amanda with the local authorities could be located. Sylvia was told that Amanda was an adult who could make decisions without informing her mother. Sylvia believes that Amanda's lifestyle may have played a role in how the authorities viewed her disappearance. Amanda had suffered from an eating disorder and eventually developed problems with drugs and alcohol. She ran with a rough crowd, and her employment history working as a hairstylist and bartender was spotty. Amanda was known to police, having previously spent a few days in jail on minor charges. More relevant to her disappearance was the fact that she had been involved with a police investigation in the summer of 1991 and had been about to appear as a witness against several of her when she went missing. Just a few days before Amanda disappeared, her mother had received a phone call from a man with Caribbean accent. He did not identify himself, but told Sylvia that if Amanda testified in court, she would never be seen again. Sylvia believes that it is possible Amanda left home to protect both herself and her mother from retribution from the people she was due to testify against. It is of course also possible that she disappeared because she met with foul play at the hands of one or more of those people. Without assistance from the police, Sylvia looked for her daughter on her own. In the months following Amanda's disappearance, she regularly traveled to downtown Toronto looking for her or anyone who knew her. She ran ads in the Toronto Star asking for information for years. In the years since she disappeared, Amanda has not used her health insurance or credit cards, and there has been no record of her using her driver's license as a form of identification. She did not have a passport at the time of her disappearance, and there is no record of her crossing the border into the United States, which did not always require a passport. Amanda's name made it to the missing persons list maintained by the Ontario Provincial Police in 2007 following an investigation by a different regional police force into a set of unidentified human remains which were ultimately found to not belong to Amanda. This resulted in new inquiries but no new answers. In 2016, the case was sent to the OPP's Criminal Investigations Branch as a matter of routine. In 2017, they formally reopened the case following an unconfirmed sighting of Amanda in Illinois, but she remains missing. I look back on many things and yes, she tried to protect me and probably still does to this day if she's out there, alive, Amanda's mother Sylvia said in 2017. I want people to know that Amanda was a good person and no matter what she may have done that was wrong. She loved me and I her. In 2011, 33-year-old Anthony Tyrone Lee lived in Longview, Texas with his mother, Sharon Bowers. That June, he was about to make a trip to Houston, where he would be helping his sister move into a new home. Prior to leaving on that trip, he had plans to attend a rodeo with his mother. However, on June 25th, the day of the rodeo, his mother arrived home only to find that her son was not there. Sharon quickly realized that something was not right. The ironing board had been set up and the clothes Anthony had planned to wear to the rodeo were with it. However, one of the pant legs was still hanging off of the side of the board as though Anthony had been in the middle of ironing the pants and was somehow interrupted. Anthony's clothing and shoes were still the home and as best as Sharon could determine. Her son had left home wearing his house shoes, which was out of character for him. Anthony's mood had recently changed and he had been acting nervous in the weeks before he went missing. He had $600 in the bank which remained in his account untouched. 3 weeks after Anthony's disappearance, Sharon began receiving disturbing phone calls. At first, the caller would play what Sharon described as some of Death's song. Then came calls from someone telling Sharon, that's what he gets for snitching. The last person Anthony saw prior to his disappearance, as far as his mother knows, was a known local drug dealer who had wrecked Anthony's car a week before he went missing. Sharon feared that Anthony may have gotten himself into a situation where either he felt like he needed to go into hiding or someone else was holding him somewhere. However, since Anthony left behind his belongings and his money and because of the phone calls, Sharon is not optimistic that he will return home. I don't feel like my child is still living, she told the Longview News Journal. After all the flyers and all the friends he has, it's just not like him to not call and talk to anybody. The Longview Police Department ran out of leads to follow by the first anniversary of Anthony's disappearance, but has not given up on his case. Anthony is listed in state and national missing persons databases. There's somebody that knows what happened to my son, and all we want is to know too, Sharon Bowers said in 2012. According to numerous surveys, Wellington's crime rate was below the national average, and it was recognized as one of Florida's safest cities. However, during Memorial Day weekend in May 1990, while others were celebrating with parades, barbecues, and picnics, a tragic event occurred involving the Warren family. Marlene Warren, born on April 15, 1950, grew up in Michigan and cherished her time with her sisters on their grandfather's farm. She had a passion for baking, creating art, and painting, with a particular fondness for clowns. The whole family shared her love for clowns, and her parents even had a room dedicated to them. Marlene had her first child in 1965 at the tender age of 15 and named him after her husband, John Ahrens. Later in 1969, she had another child named Julie. Sadly, Marlene became a single mother of two after her first husband, John Ahrens, died in a car accident. She'd later marry Michael Warren in 1972. Michael Warren was just 19 and younger than 22-year-old Marlene. They moved from Michigan to South Florida where Michael's family lived. Michael got a job as a meat inspector, but they also started investing in rental properties, which eventually brought in a lot of money. Marlene managed the rental properties, and Michael quit his job to open a used car lot called Bargain Motors. He sold cars to people who had no credit and couldn't buy them elsewhere. In the late 1980s, Mike and Marlene bought their dream home in Wellington, Florida. However, in 1983, Michael was arrested for tampering with the odometers on his used cars. He pleaded guilty and received probation, but kept his business for a few more years. Mike and Marlene led separate lives, with Mike focused on his business and spending time at the racetrack, while Marlene managed their rental properties. In 1988, tragedy struck again when Marlene's oldest son, John Jr., died in a car accident at just 22 years old. His death caused tension in Michael and Marlene's relationship. During this time, Michael Warren met Sheila Keen, the wife of one of his employees, Richard Spud Keen. There was an instant connection between Michael and Sheila. However, initially, they kept their relationship a secret, even though it was obvious to those around them. On a rainy Saturday morning of May 26, 1990, Michael went to the racetrack, while 40-year-old Marlene stayed at home. She was cooking breakfast for her son, 21-year-old Joey, who had some of his friends over. At around 10:45 a.m., there was a knock on the door. When Marlene opened it, she saw a clown holding flowers and balloons, and she assumed it was a gift. She was pretty excited to see a clown at her door, having loved them ever since she was a child. But behind the balloons in the clown costume, the clown held a gun. The clown pulled out the gun and shot her in the face. Joey heard the gunshot, ran to the door and saw the clown driving away in a Chrysler LeBaron. Marlene was dying on the ground, and a neighbor named Bill Kramer had heard the shot, too. Some people ran out, saying that someone had shot Joey's mother. An ambulance was called, and Marlene was taken to the hospital, but she died 2 days later on May 28, 1990. Marlene was an outstanding human. Friendly, loving, kind, always courteous, and always respectful, but her end was unfortunate. After Marlene's shooting, Joey saw a clown walking away, but all he could remember was that the clown had brown eyes. Initially, Joey's description to the police was vague, saying the suspect had broad shoulders and big hands. However, he did see the clown drive away in a white Chrysler LeBaron, which was a crucial detail. At first, Michael Warren was a suspect, but he had an alibi as he was at the racetrack. As a result, the police turned their attention to his girlfriend, Sheila Keen, and the more they investigated, the more evidence pointed toward her involvement. There were allegations of an affair between Michael Warren and Sheila Keen at the time of the crime. Michael vehemently denied these. However, investigators were scrutinizing the relationship to identify the motive and opportunity for Marlene's murder. Sheila also went by Sheila Skeltra, her maiden name, and had a criminal record dating back to her upbringing in Central Florida. Sheila was known to be headstrong, some say wild, and very attractive. Her long hair was often described as similar to Crystal Gale's. Sheila had a criminal record from a young age, including a shoplifting charge and a theft charge a few years later. Her mugshot showed her smiling, seemingly unbothered by the arrest. People who knew her revealed that Sheila had associated herself with older men and bad influences from a young age. She was married to Richard Spud Keen, a former Ku Klux Klan member who had served time for drug trafficking. Richard was 20 years older than Sheila. Sheila even moved to Georgia to be close to him while he was in prison. After Sheila's husband was released from prison in Georgia, they moved back to Florida, where Richard started working with Michael Warren. Soon the three ex-felons began to spend a lot of time together, engaging in sketchy activities. One such incident involves Sheila dressing up as a prostitute to meet someone who had purchased a car in a motel room. While she was in there, Richard and Michael, who were armed, repossessed the car. Sheila was also spotted holding the buyer at gunpoint, and the trio fled the scene. As time passed, Michael and Sheila grew closer and Richard faded into the background. Sheila rented an apartment in Pine Ridge, and the residents assumed that she was married to Michael because of the amount of time he spent there. Co-workers of Michael and Sheila told investigators that they believed the two were having an affair. They would go out for long lunches and were very affectionate towards each other. There was substantial evidence suggesting that they were indeed having an affair. Police record quoted Michael's mother recalling an incident where she accompanied Michael on one of his racetrack outings. She sensed something between Michael and Sheila and asked her if she loved him. Sheila confirmed that she did, but Michael responded by saying that he loved himself. During this period, Michael's marriage with Marlene was falling apart. An employee at the car dealership claimed that Michael would come in furious after fighting with Marlene and offer $10,000 to anyone who would kill her. There are also reports of Michael saying that he would make someone rich if they got rid of his wife, and they would never have to work again. After Marlene's murder, both Michael and Sheila became suspects in the case. While Michael was the obvious suspect, investigators started to question whether his girlfriend could have committed the crime. The nature of the murder raised suspicions, as most men would shoot their victims in the heart, not in the face. As investigators delved deeper into the case, the evidence started to point toward Sheila instead of Michael, leading them to believe that she might have a motive to commit the crime. In the investigation, finding the white Chrysler LeBaron that Joey saw became the top priority for the police. They learned that a couple had rented the car from a nearby car lot called Payless Cars. When it was time to return the car, they got confused and dialed the wrong number from an ad in the phone book. The ad was taken out by Michael Warren for his car lot, Bargain Motors, and the number listed was his. But the ad that Michael put out looked very similar to that of an ad for the Payless car lot. The couple called the number thinking it was for Payless Cars, and someone at Michael's car lot instructed them to leave the car outside the gate with the keys in the windshield wipers. However, the car was stolen shortly after. On the day of Marlene's funeral, investigators located a Chrysler LeBaron in a Winn-Dixie parking lot approximately 5 miles away from the crime scene. A number of hairs were discovered inside the car, some of which appeared to be from an acrylic wig with orange and yellow fibers. However, the DNA technology at that time was insufficient to identify precisely what the fibers were, as well as the hair samples. In addition to the car, investigators also found the place where the suspect bought the clown costume, balloons, and flowers. 2 women who worked at the Spotlight Capizio costume shop told police that a woman came in a few days before the murder and requested a clown costume, specifically Ruby's clown costume, an Afro clown wig, Bob Kelly clown makeup, and a sponge nose. Initially, the shop workers asked the woman to return the next day as they were closed, but the woman insisted on purchasing the costume that night. She was described as around 5'8" with brown eyes, long chocolate hair, and wearing jeans and a men's work shirt. The police reported that the shop workers identified Sheila from a photo lineup, stating that she was the woman who came to the store a few days before the murder at closing time. Sheila's potential involvement in Marlene's murder continued to be investigated, and more evidence started to pile up against her. One piece of evidence came from a nearby public supermarket where the specific type of Mylar balloons used by the clown were sold. An employee there identified a woman with long brown hair who bought those balloons just an hour and a half before the murder. And that employee was also able to identify Sheila from photos. Further adding to the suspicion was the fact that Sheila had previously dressed up as a clown. During her marriage to Richard Keen, the couple lived in a trailer park in Pahokee on the edge of Lake Okeechobee. Sheila had become friendly with people around town, including some employees at an auto parts store. On one occasion, she had even dressed up as a clown to entertain them. Despite this mounting evidence, prosecutors didn't feel they had enough to make an arrest. In 1991, about a year later, the investigation heated up as Michael and Sheila became the prime suspects. In an attempt to clear his name, Michael went on a radio show accompanied by Joey. During the interview, Michael denied any involvement in the murder, and Joey defended Sheila, who he was surprised was even a suspect. Despite Joey's initial belief that the clown was a man due to its large size, evidence was beginning to point toward a woman. Michael had an alibi that confirmed he was at the racetracks during the time of the murder, leaving Sheila as the primary suspect. However, just when it seemed like the case was going nowhere, a twist emerged. Backtracking in time, in 1987, when Joey was around 18 years old, he was charged with attempted murder. The Warren family hired Christopher DeSantis as their lawyer. After a successful hearing at the courthouse, DeSantis and Michael Warren were walking out celebrating Joey's trial win. Then Michael casually asked whether someone who hired a hitman to kill their wife would still be able to inherit their estate. The lawyer was taken aback, but answered that the law prohibited a murderer from inheriting, except in cases of manslaughter or if the murderer was someone else. DeSantis, unfortunately, gave another example that he later regretted. He said that if someone wore a clown suit, their identity would be hidden, making it difficult to get a conviction. He didn't intend to advise Michael to wear a clown suit, but the point was that if identity couldn't be proven, then there could be no conviction. Essentially, DeSantis had given him a recipe for murder. As the investigation into Marlene's murder progressed, and suspicions fell on Michael and Sheila, the investigators interviewed DeSantis too because they thought that maybe the clown figure was taking revenge on Joey and his friends. But then this interaction between DeSantis and Michael became a significant piece of evidence. It raised the question of whether Michael had taken the lawyer's advice to heart and used a clown suit to conceal his identity while committing the crime. As the investigation continued, it became clear that Marlene had expressed fear of her husband prior to her murder. She had told people that she wanted to divorce Mike but was scared he would kill her. This, coupled with DeSantis' statement, suggested that Mike had knowledge of how he could inherit property after killing his wife. Despite this, there were no arrests made in the weeks following these revelations, as investigators needed concrete evidence to proceed. The case remained unsolved as the months dragged on. Despite not acknowledging any romantic involvement, Michael and Sheila's co-workers had their suspicions. A year after Marlene's death, they let their guard down and took a vacation together to the Bahamas. At a fancy hotel resort casino, other couples noticed them come in. Sheila appeared uneasy, while Michael was himself loud and brash. This tipped off the police yet again. Meanwhile, Michael decided to make another appearance on a radio show. And in that radio show, Michael said that he had last spoke to Sheila a month ago, when in reality, Sheila was with Michael all the time. After Michael's radio appearance, investigators began to focus on him as a suspect in his wife's murder. They searched his business and obtained a warrant to go through his records. Michael had a history of odometer tampering, and investigators found that he had been doing the same thing at his car lot. They charged him with multiple crimes, including racketeering, odometer tampering, fraud, and theft. Although Michael was sentenced to 9 years in prison, there was still no concrete evidence linking him or Sheila to Marlene's murder. The investigation seemed to hit a dead end. But in 1997, new evidence emerged that would bring the case back to life. In 1997, a man contacted the police with a lead linking Michael Warren to his wife's murder. The informant was the son of an employee at Bargain Motors who had recently died, and the informant claimed that his father had made a shocking confession to him on his deathbed. According to the informant, his father told him that all the answers to the case could be found by pulling up a vehicle that was submerged in water. He even gave the exact location of the vehicle and claimed to know who planned the murder and where the gun and clown costume were hidden. This was a major lead, and investigators believed that they could finally solve the case by recovering the murder weapon and costume. Divers were sent down to the location and they found the vehicle, but unfortunately, there was nothing of significance inside it. This setback sent the investigation back to square one, and the case again remained cold for some time. In 2002, Michael Warren and Sheila Keen decided to get married in Las Vegas as the investigation into Marlene Warren's death had come to a halt. The case remained unsolved, but Marlene's parents were convinced that Sheila was the killer clown. However, in 2013, the case was reopened, and Sheila was once again a prime suspect, particularly due to her marriage to Michael. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office received a grant to investigate cold cases, including the Wellington clown murder. They formed a task force with members from the state attorney's office and the FBI to review the evidence and interview witnesses. The task force submitted new evidence for DNA analysis, which helped them get the indictment. This included DNA samples from different people who were suspects in the case, including Michael and Sheila. It also included the possible DNA samples found in the clown wig and other hair strands that were inside the Chrysler LeBaron. The evidence gathered from interviews and analysis allowed investigators to take a fresh look at the case. Mike and Sheila had started a new life in Abington, a small town in Virginia where they had reinvented themselves. Sheila had even changed her name to Debbie, and they were living a seemingly happy life, with neighbors describing them as friendly and in love. They had even opened up a popular fast food restaurant called the Purple Cow in Tennessee, just across the border. Investigators eventually tracked down Michael and Sheila at the restaurant. Despite being prime suspects, they were not on the run or trying to hide, and they were still working and living their lives openly. It seemed that they had finally moved on from their past and were doing well. Although Michael Warren was generally described as a laid-back and happy individual, not everyone had a favorable impression of him, especially after an encounter with one of his neighbors that showed another side of him. Apparently, Michael decided to take some rocks from his neighbor's property without permission, but when confronted about it, he suggested that they should be neighborly about the situation. The neighbor replied that the neighborly thing to do would have been to ask for permission first. Michael then responded with insults, calling the neighbor scrawny and using a derogatory term. The neighbor stood his ground and called Michael a bully. As Michael and Sheila lived their seemingly idyllic life in Abington, Virginia, a dark secret lingered in the shadows. One night during a party, a drunken Sheila, known to her co-workers as Debbie, revealed a chilling tale of how she had gotten away with murder in Florida. Meanwhile, in Florida, detectives relentlessly pursued the case, utilizing the latest DNA technology to uncover a potential suspect in the murder of Marlene Warren. The evidence pointed to one person, the very same Sheila Keen Warren, or Debbie, who had casually shared her deadly secret with her unsuspecting colleagues. On December 26, 2017, Mike and Sheila were driving back to their hometown of Abington from Vermont in their Cadillac SUV when they were pulled over by the police. Sheila was arrested but didn't ask why. Instead, she asked if her husband was also being arrested. The reason for her arrest: Sheila had been indicted for first-degree murder with a firearm. This same crime that had been unsolved for 27 years. Despite being a prime suspect from the beginning of the investigation, Sheila had managed to evade arrest until that day. Now she faced the potential penalty of life in prison. As Sheila was being brought into the police station, a video captured the moment, followed by a mugshot. In the mugshot, she is seen smiling, reminiscent of her teenage mugshot when she was first arrested. The contrast between the heinousness of the crime she was being accused of and the nonchalant expression on her face was unsettling. Sheila Keen Warren's lawyer stated that she strongly denied any involvement in the murder. During her time in prison, she wrote numerous letters that showed her belief in her own innocence. Despite the passage of 27 years and the initial description of the clown being that of a man, the state of Florida was confident that they would secure a conviction, even though the murder weapon was still missing. Sheila had been awaiting trial in jail after her arrest in 2017, while investigators continued to build their case against her. Finally, on April 25, 2023, 59-year-old Sheila pleaded guilty to the crime of dressing up as a clown and shooting Marlene Warren. Although her lawyer still maintained her innocence, he believed that her guilty plea helped her case. If the jury had found her guilty, she could have faced a minimum sentence of 25 years in prison. However, by pleading guilty, she received a reduced sentence of only 12 years. Remarkably, her lawyer even suggested that Sheila could be released as early as 2024 due to her good behavior in prison. With Sheila's confession, the investigators finally solved the case. But do you think that Sheila meant her confession, or was she just really looking for a deal to cut her sentence? 37-year-old Erica Lloyd, a devoted mother to her 12-year-old son, lived in Walnut Creek, California. The year 2020 was challenging for her, as she couldn't work due to salon closures from the pandemic and faced the difficulties of supporting her son with distance learning. To alleviate the stress, she planned a camping trip to Joshua Tree National Park, 7 hours from home, in June, hoping that the solitude of nature would provide some relief. Erica set out for her trip on Sunday, June 14th, and it was confirmed she arrived at the park. However, on June 16th, she suddenly stopped communicating with her family. That same day, California Highway Patrol found Erica's vehicle near the intersection of Shelton Road and Highway 62, near 29 Palms. It appeared Erica had last been driving back to the nearby national park. As it was facing south, the car had been vandalized with its radio and front and back windshields found smashed in. In addition to the vandalism, there were indications that the disabled vehicle had been in an accident. Its airbag had deployed, and it had damage to its undercarriage. The owners of the company that towed away the car believed it had hit a large object, potentially the berm of the road, due to the fact that car's radiator in the AC condenser had been smashed backwards. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department did not believe that there were any signs of foul play at the scene where the car was found. A massive air and ground search was launched for Erica, with volunteers, park rangers, and members of the Bernardino County Sheriff's Department participating in the effort. Altering vehicles and search dogs were also brought in. Erica's camping equipment was located at a campsite at the Jumbo Rocks campground. Caves and mines in the area were searched for any sign of Erica. Erica's parents made multiple trips to California from their home in Maryland to help with the search and to put up flyers. A witness did report a sighting of a woman matching Erica's description, walking along Highway 62 with another person a week after Erica went missing. But this woman has not been conclusively proven to be Erica. Erica's family feared that she may have sustained a head injury when her car was in the accident and wandered off either disoriented or suffering from memory loss. Despite ongoing efforts, Erica remained missing for months. On January 31st, 2021, hikers discovered what they believed to be human skeletal remains. They called in their discovery, and deputies from the Morongo Basin Sheriff Station were dispatched to the scene. They confirmed that the remains were human. Detectives from the Specialized Investigations Division removed the remains from the scene, and a forensic odontologist was able to use dental records to identify the remains as belonging to Erica Lloyd. The cause and manner of her death have not been determined. The Sheriff Department's investigation is ongoing. Erica's remains were found in a desert field approximately 1/4 of a mile east of the 5200 block of Danby Road in Wonder Valley. If Erica had stayed on roads as she walked away from where her car had been found, she would have walked 8 miles to reach the location where her remains were ultimately located. If she had instead headed out into the desert, she would have covered 6 miles before reaching that location. Erica's brother Colin posted on the Facebook page that had been dedicated to the search for Erica, announcing the discovery of her remains and thanking the numerous people and organizations who had helped look for her. Right now is the time for grieving, and I encourage everyone to pause and reflect on the beautiful soul we've lost. Our Erica, he further wrote in the post. Remember her, cherish her memory, celebrate moments past, and laugh. She would always make you laugh. Erica adored everyone. She left a bright smile on everyone's heart. She would remind you of who you truly were and how important and loved you were. She warmed your soul. Let us hold her spirit dearly and allow it to work through us to serve others what she would want us to do. Between 1991-26, a string of violent rapes was committed across 6 counties in Northern California. Believed, based on details consistent across all the attacks, that all of them were committed by the same man, who came to be known as the NorCal rapist. He would break into the home of young women, usually of Asian descent, and spend hours assaulting them. He often used either a knife or a gun, or promises that he had such a weapon to subdue them and would then bind them with handcuffs, rope, or zip ties and put tape over their eyes. Several of his victims managed to injure him as they fought to get away. One victim briefly broke free of her restraints and stabbed him in the arm with a pair of scissors. He took her bedding with him in an effort to not leave evidence behind, but he failed to take a pillowcase which had his blood on it. Another victim grabbed the knife he had with him, cutting her hand in the process, but breaking off its tip, which she used to stab him just above his right eye. The rapist would sometimes kidnap his victims, taking them to ATMs and forcing them to withdraw cash. He would also ransack his victims' homes looking for valuables, sometimes taking their bank cards to withdraw cash from ATMs himself. He used various threats to try to prevent his victims from going to the police, leaving a note reading, "Don't call the cops," with an arrow pointing to the victim's mother's address and phone number in her address book, and telling another victim the location where she worked, and then threatening that he would show co-workers photographs he had taken of her during her assault. Authorities had DNA from all but one of the crime scenes, which confirmed that those victims had been attacked by the same man. Some of the DNA evidence came not from the sexual assault kits, but from the assailant's blood left behind when the victim fought back. However, the DNA profile was not in any criminal database. In 2018, therefore, authorities used genetic genealogy to try to use the DNA to identify their suspect. The DNA profile was uploaded into GEDmatch, a genealogy database, and familial matches were identified. By constructing family trees of the individuals who shared DNA with the rapist, authorities were eventually able to identify match. They collected a drinking straw that suspect threw away and compared the DNA found on it to the profile found at the crime scenes. It was a match. On September 20th, 2018, 58-year-old Roy Charles Waller of Benicia, California was arrested as he came into work at UC Berkeley, where he had worked since 1992, employed as a safety specialist. He was married and a father. At the time of his arrest, Waller was initially only charged with 12 counts of forced sexual assault in connection to the final attack attributed to the NorCal rapist. By the time his trial began in October of 2020, however, he was charged with a total of 46 felonies. While he went to trial for raping 9 women, DNA also linked him to a further 8 cases throughout Northern California. All 9 of the women Waller was accused of raping and attacking testified at his trial, as did numerous members of law enforcement and sexual assault forensic nurse examiners who had worked on the case. Many of them were now retired, and several of them had traveled from out of state to testify. In addition to the DNA, prosecutors also presented further evidence discovered after Waller's arrest. In a storage unit he rented, they found a ski mask, zip ties, 2 tasers, condoms, duct tape, and handcuffs. There was also a duffel bag containing more than 20 pairs of women's underwear, including 1 pair that matched a pair that had been taken from the home of a victim during a NorCal rapist attack. Waller testified on his own behalf and claimed that he had some of the items in the storage unit because he was a collector of odd things, and others because of a relationship he previously had with a particularly wild girlfriend. Waller had also posted several Craigslist ads over the years looking for young, female Asian roommates. On the stand, he claimed he had done so as favors for the daughters of various former girlfriends, although he claimed to not remember any of their names. While he said he had met those women through profiles they had posted on dating sites, he claimed that they had needed his help posting housing ads online. When questioned as to why he had compiled a database on his computer listing the physical descriptions of various women, the vehicles they drove, their addresses, and notations about whether or not they lived in ground floor apartments, Waller said he had simply kept a list of people he hoped to introduce himself to. The prosecution maintained that Waller had a faint scar above his right eye, where one victim had stabbed her attacker, but Waller's defense maintained that there was no such scar. Waller rolled up his sleeve during his testimony to show that he had only a round scar from a pain-falling accident on his arm and no signs that he had been stabbed there with scissors by one of the victims. When asked to explain how his DNA ended up at almost all of the crime scenes, Waller said he had never been to any of them and that he was not a DNA expert. Other testimony given during the trial detailed how Waller had ties to other evidence in the case and how he had come to talk to authorities about the case more than a decade before his arrest. Following the last attack attributed to the NorCal rapist, in which he assaulted and raped 2 female roommates for hours in their North Natomas apartment in 2006, Police were able to locate security camera footage in the neighborhood, which showed a white Toyota 4Runner they believed may have been involved in the attack. They then visited numerous Toyota dealerships, and salespeople helped them narrow down the vehicle in the footage as being a higher-end model made between 1999 and 2002. Then police searched vehicle registrations in Northern California to identify owners of white 4Runners from those model years. Members of various departments in the area began the ambitious task of speaking with thousands of people who owned such vehicles. They conducted thousands of interviews, distributed thousands of questionnaires, and took voluntary DNA samples from over 100 men. On February 11, 2007, Sacramento Police Detective Jimmy Vigan and his partner went to the home of a nurse in Fairfield to speak with her about her 4Runner. Her boyfriend at the time, who lived with her part-time, was also at the home. He was Roy Charles Waller. They did not ask for a DNA cheek swab from him, however. One of the two victims in the final attack had briefly caught a glimpse of the perpetrator when her blindfold slipped and helped develop a composite sketch. The gun and his partner did not think Waller resembled the sketch and believed him to be too old and too heavy to be the man in it. They left a questionnaire for the nurse to fill out after their conversation and left. Following his testimony about this interaction, Detective Egan told the Sacramento Bee that he wishes he had asked for a DNA swab from Waller at that time. He hoped, however, that his meeting with Waller was not without benefit, even though it did not lead to an arrest at the time. Since the North Natomas attack was the last attributed to the NorCal rapist, he believed this interaction with authorities may have scared Waller into ceasing his crime spree. The nurse also testified at the trial. She had traveled to the Philippines for a funeral, although it is unclear if she was out of the country at the exact time of the 2006 dual attack, freeing Waller to use her vehicle, which she had access to without her knowledge. On November 18, 2020, the jury returned their verdict after just 2.5 hours of deliberation. They found Waller guilty of all of the 46 charges against him, which included of kidnapping, forcible rape, oral copulation, sodomy, and foreign penetration. "It didn't matter what I did," Waller's attorney, Joe Farina, said following the announcement of the verdict. "It was a DNA case. We could not overcome the fact that his DNA was at nearly all the crime scenes." He also said that his client had not shared his concerns about how seriously the jury would take the DNA evidence, saying Waller never seemed to understand it was a DNA case. He thought he was going to be acquitted. He denied having anything to do with it. Waller's sentencing hearing was held on December 18, 2020. 5 of his victims addressed the court during it. One of the roommates from the double attack in 2006 told the court that she had showered without feeling afraid for the first time following her assault on the day of Waller's arrest in 2018 because she no longer had to worry about him breaking into her home again. She also pointed out that Waller had not expressed any remorse or apologized to any of his victims. She revealed that his daughter, on the other hand, had reached out to her and apologized for her father's actions. Nicole Ernest Pate, believed to be Waller's first victim, told the court he should experience the barbaric sense of time around him, knowing that this is his fate will set me free for good. Following the statements from the victims, the judge imposed 2 terms, one of 459 years and one of 438 years to life. The sentences are to run consecutively, giving Waller a total sentence of 897 years to life. The judge ruled that Waller would not be eligible for parole both because he considered him to be a serious danger to society and because he had presented blatantly false testimony at trial. Waller maintains his innocence and plans to appeal his conviction. 40-year-old Roselio Gutierrez Jr. lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and was a loving father of 2 children with whom he spent every other weekend. He was very outgoing, had lots of friends, and loved spending time outdoors. The last confirmed sighting of Roselio occurred on Sunday, May 17, 2020, when he dropped his daughter off in Twin Lakes, a town 25 miles west of Kenosha. His last communication came at 8:27 that evening when he sent a text to a friend asking them to come over to his apartment. However, when they arrived at 9:37, he did not answer the door despite repeated knocks on the door, phone calls, and text messages. Roselio failed to report to his job as a contractor in Lake County, Illinois on May 18th or 19th, which was highly unusual. Roselio had been dating a woman at the time, and she became concerned when she could not get in contact with him. She, therefore, went to his apartment in the 37100 block of 15th Street to check on him. When she arrived, the sliding glass patio doors open. She looked inside and saw that the furniture was out of place, as though there had been an altercation in the apartment, and a large area rug was missing. There was also a large amount of fresh blood on the floor and on some pieces of furniture. She immediately called the police. Roselio's vehicles were parked outside his apartment, and his cell phone had been left behind. Upon hearing of the disappearance, Roselio's mother and stepfather, Celia and Eugene Patterson, immediately began the drive to Wisconsin from their home in Colorado to help search for him. Celia moved to the area as her son's disappearance dragged on, both to be close to the investigation and to spend time with their grandchildren, who were missing their father. While they could not quickly locate Roselio, authorities did quickly identify an individual with a motive to harm him. On May 21st, 2 days after Roselio was reported missing, 39-year-old Zachary Anderson of Mequon, Wisconsin was charged with 2 felonies for stalking his ex-girlfriend, who was also the mother of his children, and her current boyfriend. That woman's name has not been disclosed in the media because of the stalking case, but the boyfriend Anderson was accused was Roselio Gutierrez Jr. In the criminal complaint against Anderson, the woman claims that he was aware of her relationship with Roselio and did not approve of it. She believed he had been tracking her movements and following her based on places she saw him and information he had about her movements and private conversations. When police interviewed Anderson's daughter, she told them that she had seen items that had been stolen from Roselio's car while it was parked outside of her mother's home, including a letter and his car registration in her father's possession. Her father had also given her a phone and instructed her examination of that phone revealed that it had been used to order tracking devices from Amazon on April 21st. The girl also said that Anderson admitted to her that he had been videotaping her mother and Roselio. Anderson denies these charges, and his defense attorney told the court that his former girlfriend had previously made false allegations against him. She had unsuccessfully petitioned for a restraining order against him in the past. Anderson told detectives that he was jealous of his former girlfriend's relationship with Roselio, but denied tracking her movements, recording her, or stealing from Roselio. He claimed his daughter had simply lied to the police and that he had never even met Roselio. Anderson remained in custody on the stalking charges until December of 2020, when they were formally dropped. Anderson was then charged with 2 new counts of stalking as well as with hiding a body and first-degree intentional homicide. While authorities had not located Roselio, they believed they had a strong enough circumstantial case to try Anderson for his murder without a body. Anderson was held without bond. Authorities had examined Anderson's minivan and discovered that its rear seats had been removed. Carpet in the back of the van had been cut away, and there was evidence that bleach had been used to clean it. 1 speck of blood was found in the car that had not been washed away, however, and DNA proved that the blood belonged to Roselio Gutierrez Jr. It was after the DNA evidence was processed that Anderson was charged with murder. In addition to Anderson's minivan, police had also searched a burn pit near his home with cadaver dogs. They alerted on a burned bottle of bleach and what was left of several pieces of clothing, including the elastic band from a pair of underwear, buttons that came from Levi Strauss jeans, and steel-toed boots. According to one of Anderson's former partners, he had borrowed a pair of steel-toed boots from her grandfather and never returned them. Authorities found another burn pit during a search of a tree farm Anderson's family owned in Saukville and found in it remnants of fabric that matched the color and pattern of a shirt Anderson had been witnessed wearing as he left home on May 17th, the day Roselio witnessing. Surveillance footage also shows Anderson purchasing 2 bags of 13-gallon garbage bags, 2 bags of latex gloves, 2 containers of bleach, and some items of food at a Walmart in Saukville the day after Roselito's disappearance. His cell phone records from that day place him in the area of Cedar Beach Road from 8:45 a.m. to 11:41 p.m. This location is approximately 10 miles from his family tree farm and within half a mile of both Lake Michigan and a deep water-filled quarry. Despite all the circumstantial evidence that Anderson murdered Roselio and potential clues as to where he may have disposed of his body, it has still not been found. While they believe they know what happened to Roselio, his family is distressed by the fact that they still do not know where he is. No one deserves this, Roselio's mother told the Kenosha News after the homicide charge was filed against Anderson. "No one deserves for a life to be taken, and then, to make matters worse, not to be able to mourn over his body and give him a decent and Christian burial." Lisa Marie Zager, born in March 1968, spent most of her life in Agawam, Massachusetts. As one of 4 children in a tight-knit family, she had a deep passion for music, playing several instruments, including the flute and saxophone, in the Agawam High School band. She also served as the drum major for 2 years. During high school, Lisa was an active member of the National Honor Society and the American Field Service, and she contributed to both the school newspaper and the literary magazine. After graduating from Agawam High in 1986, she went on to Westfield State College. She graduated cum laude with a degree in elementary education in 1990. Her dream was to be a teacher, and her love of children had led her to work for several summers at a summer camp and to teach Sunday school at her parish. Children loved Lisa as well, in large part because she remained willing to see and enjoy the silly things in life, even as an adult. Lisa did not find a teaching position straight out of college, but did get hired as a teacher's aide at Agawam Middle School, working largely with students in the special education program. Lisa still loved music, and if a song she loved came on the radio when she was driving, she would pull into a parking lot so she could turn up the radio and get out of the car to dance. She loved to draw and often gave pieces of her artwork as gifts to friends and family. Lisa remained close with her family as a young adult and had a close group of friends. Many of these friends were close with the entire Zager family. Lisa's boyfriend, Blair, co-owned a house with one of the friends he had in common with Lisa, and they had several other members of their friend group as roommates, including Lisa's sister Lynn. In addition to working at the middle school during the day, 24-year-old Lisa also worked in the evenings as a clerk at Brittany's card and gift shop, where she had been employed since 1989. When one of Lisa's co-workers, named Sophia, arrived at the card shop on the morning of April 16, 1992, she was surprised to see Lisa's car still in the parking lot, as Lisa should have been at her job at the middle school at that time. When she went to the front door, she found it unlocked. The lights were still on, and the music was still playing when she went inside. Lisa would normally turn both of them off before leaving for the night and never forgot to lock up at the end of her shift. Sophia did not immediately panic, thinking perhaps Lisa had forgotten something at the store the night before and had returned on a break between classes, maybe turning on all of the lights and the music to help her open the store while she was there. Sophia called out Lisa's name but got no answer. She walked up and down the aisle's cash register. At this point, Sophia knew that something was wrong, and her fears only increased when she found a back room in disarray. She ran out of the store and to another business across the street to call the police. Lisa had not reported to work at Agawam Middle School on 16th, which was unusual enough that the school called her mother, inquiring about her. Lisa's mother, Dee, did not immediately panic, assuming there was an innocent explanation for Lisa not going to work, like her oversleeping, which was unusual but not impossible. Word of the scene at the card store and Lisa's disappearance community quickly, however, reaching Lisa's sister Lynn shortly after Sophia called the police. Lynn went to her mother's job to tell her that Lisa was missing, and at that point Dee realized that something truly was wrong. At the card store, police found a dent in the door that looked like a heel mark and boxes in the back that were crushed, as though someone had been on top of them. There was also a small amount of blood splatter on several boxes. It appeared that Lisa had somehow been lured to the back of the store, where there had been a struggle. Police theorized that she had been taken out of the back entrance on the side of the building and into an alley. 2 doors and a card rack were removed by police as evidence. No money was found to be missing from the cash register. Lisa's shift on 15th had started at 4 p.m. and she was supposed to close the store at 9. She was the only employee at the store for her shift. A police officer had noticed that the lights at the card shop had still been on at 3 a.m. and put it in his notes but could not follow up on it because he was then called to transport a prisoner. Lisa had spoken with the owner of the carpet store next door for about 15 minutes before he left to go home at 7:35 after closing his store. They commiserated over the parking problems at the shopping center caused by people using its lot when going to the nearby bowling alley instead of the stores in the center. Before he left, he told Lisa he wouldn't be challenging any of the drivers because, in his words, there are a lot of crazy people out there. Authorities were eventually able to narrow down the time of Lisa's disappearance to a short window of time. The last transaction on the cash register occurred at 8:20 p.m. Another customer arrived at the store at 9:0:5 but found it empty. She thought she heard a noise from the back of the store but left without investigating it. This meant Lisa vanished sometime between ringing out the purchase at 8:20 and when the customer arrived just after 9 on April 15th. Scent tracking dogs were brought in and nearby drains and sewers were searched. Officers searched the surrounding area on foot, and helicopters were used to search the area from above. Both the state police and the FBI were brought into the investigation. The Westfield River was not far from the shop, so its banks were also searched. Numerous people who knew Lisa, both in Massachusetts and in Connecticut, were interviewed. For most of the day on 16th, the case was treated as a missing persons case, but on 17th Agawam Police Lieutenant Robert Campbell told the press that the chances of Lisa simply walking away from the store were slim, and the following morning, he formally announced that the case was considered a kidnapping as their investigation had ruled out other possibilities. April 19th was Easter Sunday in 1992. With Lisa still missing, all 12 churches in Agawam passed out white ribbons for their congregants to wear as a sign of hope that Lisa would soon be found and of support for her family at their services that morning. Later that day, around 2 p.m., a man was walking his dog just a few miles away from the card shop. Looking into a wooded area off of Route 75, he saw what appeared to be a partially clothed woman's body and called the police. Based off of the clothing with the body and a charm bracelet on her wrist, the woman was quickly identified as Lisa Zager. Lisa's autopsy would show that she had been raped, and in addition to numerous defensive injuries, she had suffered 8 knife wounds. The fatal wound had been to her neck. Lisa's disappearance had been followed by 3 days of snow and sleet, so when investigators responded to the scene, they were up to their ankles in mud. They followed in each other's tracks so as to preserve evidence, such as the tire tracks that were visible in the area. After visiting the crime scene, Agawam Police Detective Wayne Massey sped to the Zager house, fearing that if he slowed down at all, he would lose his nerve and leave the difficult task of informing Lisa's family of her death to someone else. He tried to think of the least offensive word he could use for dead. He did not have to make such a determination, however, as when he arrived at the Zager family home, Lisa's mother, Dee, knew by the fact that he had come to her home that Lisa had been found and asked him if she was dead, leaving him only the task of confirming it. Dee would say, nearly 3 decades later, that she still admired him for the bravery he showed by coming to tell her in person. Lisa's funeral mass was set at Sacred Heart Church, where Lisa had been a Sunday school teacher. More than 900 people were in attendance. In early May, Joseph O'Neill, the owner of Brittany's card and gift shop, made the decision to permanently close the store. He had been considering doing so for some time, but the dismay he felt knowing Lisa had been taken from the store and the grief he felt over his employee's death finalized his decision. The store closed for the final time on May 30th. Lisa's murder was devastating not only to her family and friends, but to her community as well. Agawam previously had a very small town feel to it, and its residents felt safe there. That all changed after Lisa was abducted and killed. Some parents refused to let their daughters go to work for a time, and large numbers of women signed up for self-defense classes. Within 2 days of the discovery of Lisa's body, more than 300 women had filed for permits to carry firearms or mace. Local businesses began escorting employees to their cars when they left at night and eliminating single clerk shifts. Police also began offering to perform check-ins at businesses that were open late to ensure the safety of the people working there. All 8 members of the Detective Bureau at the Agawam Police Department were put on the case, and 8 other investigators from other agencies joined them. The FBI provided resources for the investigation, and the Connecticut State Police were brought in because the proximity of the site where Lisa's body was found to the state border. Lisa's case was being worked on nearly constantly, with investigators working shifts of 18 hours or longer, spanning every day of the week for several months. Community organizations and local businesses donated a total $5,000 for a reward for information that led to the arrest of Lisa's killer. A single source had been identified from the crime scene. While DNA science was still a relatively new tool in law enforcement, it played an important role in the investigation. While no one in the Zager family or Lisa's circle of friends ever suspected Lisa's boyfriend, Blair, of being the perpetrator, he was investigated thoroughly by police because of his relationship with Lisa. He had an alibi for the time of the murder, and his DNA was not a match to that found at the crime scene. Numerous other friends and associates of Lisa's were investigated and had their DNA tested as well. No DNA match was found, and no other clues tying any of them to the crime could be identified. Investigators were flooded with tips. They investigated and rolled out owners of trucks similar to a suspicious vehicle seen in the area the night of Lisa's death, a man who threw out some carpet and a t-shirt at a local car wash, and a man who had allegedly gone to the snack bar at Lisa's only health club so that he could stare at women while they exercised. A large number of calls were from people who were certain that they knew who killed Lisa based on a baseless rumor and subsequent conspiracy theory. One of Lisa's male friends, who was the other owner of the home Lisa's boyfriend Blair co-owned, worked at his father's restaurant near the card shop. Word spread around town that he and Blair were in a relationship and that Lisa had walked in on them, thus giving him a motive to kill her. While that would have been a potential motive had the story been true, it was a total fabrication with no evidence to support it. The friend was the son of a retired police detective, which led to allegations that Lisa's case remained unsolved because police were covering up the involvement of a son of one of their own. Since this friend was connected both to the police and to Lisa, he may have been an early topic of speculation, which subsequently gave rise to the false love triangle rumors. This friend's DNA was not a match to the sample from the scene, and he had a restaurant full of customers and co-workers who could attest to his presence at the restaurant on the night of April 15th. Most importantly, during the window of time when Lisa was abducted. It was the policy of the police to not publicly exclude suspects prior to the solving of a case, however, so while they had evidence supporting his innocence, they could not announce any of it. People who believed the rumors would continue to call in claiming he was guilty every time there was a renewed appeal for information in the case for decades, which did nothing to help the investigation. Despite ongoing investigative efforts, police eventually ran out of leads. It's like you hope the hand of God is going to come down and tap you on the shoulder, Detective Macy told the Union News on the first anniversary of Lisa's murder. But it turns out to be just rehashing old leads and trying to come up with new angles. Investigators were therefore optimistic when the national television program, Unsolved Mysteries, featured Lisa's case in October of 1993. Detective Macy went to California so that he could be at the show's phone bank when the segment first aired and receive any tips as soon as they came in. Within an hour of the broadcast, more than 100 tips related to the case were called in from throughout the Northeast. One of these tips was from the customer who had entered the card shop just after 9 p.m. on the day of the crime, which allowed authorities to identify such a narrow window of time during which Lisa was abducted. A few other tips worth following up on were received as well, but the case remained unsolved. While Lisa's time teaching children in Agawam was cut short, her family made sure she still made a major impact on education in the area. In 1995, Lisa's parents donated $1,100 to Agawam High School's science department for the purchase of equipment that would allow them to hold classes on genetics, a subject that remained close to their hearts as they still hoped it would help solve their daughter's case. They also established the Lisa M. Zager Memorial Fund, which distributed over $35,000 in scholarships within the first decade that followed Lisa's murder. On the 10th anniversary of her death, the fund donated $1,000 to the children's section at the Agawam Public Library. Lisa continued to remain an important part of her family's lives in the years following her murder. When she got married, Lisa's sister, Lynn, and her new husband brought the bouquet Lisa should have carried as the maid of honor at their wedding to her gravesite. The anniversary of Lisa's death was regularly marked by a candlelight vigil. Dee Zager never turned down an interview request, and even as years dragged on without answers, she remained committed to using the media to keep her daughter's memory alive and continue her family's mission to get justice for Lisa. The strongest piece of evidence police had in the case was the DNA found at the scene. However, they could never find a match to it in any criminal database despite regularly checking for one. They therefore began looking at alternative means by which to use the DNA to generate leads. In September of 2016, Hampton District Attorney Anthony Gallooni released 2 images developed following more than a year's worth of work by Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon used the DNA from the crime scene to predict certain physical characteristics of the man it belonged to and generated sketches showing what he may look like at 2 different ages. More than 170 tips were called in after the sketches were released. It would be almost exactly 1 more year before the contributor of that DNA was identified. On September 18, 2017, more than 25 years after Lisa's murder, it was announced that an arrest had been made in her case. 48-year-old Gary E. Shara was in custody, charged with first-degree murder, aggravated rape, and kidnapping. Shara's involvement in the case had first been suggested in 1993. Police in Agawam received a phone call from a divorce lawyer in Seattle who told them he had a client who believed her soon-to-be ex-husband had something to do with Lisa's murder. Joyce McDonald Shara had lived with her husband Gary in his hometown of Longmeadow, Massachusetts, just east of Agawam. She claimed that he was unusually interested in the media coverage of Lisa's case and would hurry into the room whenever it was mentioned on the news and remain fixated on the television for the duration of the report. Police followed up on Gary Shara, but Joyce's credibility was quickly called into question. According to friends, she had a long history of mental health issues and alcohol abuse. She and Gary had a tumultuous relationship and were in the middle of a lengthy and contentious battle over their young son, whom Joyce had taken to Seattle without Gary's knowledge or permission, even though he was the boy's custodial parent. Because of the notoriety of Lisa's case, police had previously received numerous tips from women claiming their partners had been involved that turned out to have been called in following infidelity, abuse, or a breakup in the relationship. The circumstances surrounding Joyce and Gary's relationship raised concerns that this may have been one of those tips. Gary was contacted, but denied any involvement in the crime and investigators' requests for a DNA sample. A file on Gary Shara was created and remained in the case file. Shara did speak with investigators more than once about Lisa's case. Investigators compiled a list of men they had files on who had previously refused to submit DNA samples. Shara was on that list. In 2002, he agreed to a short interview but said during it that he wouldn't provide his DNA because he was afraid of cloning. Investigators spoke to him again in 2008. During this interview, Shara seemed very aware of the possibility of the police collecting his DNA, even though he continued to refuse to provide a sample. He would not touch anything in the room, including the table, and refused the bottle of water offered to him. Following the creation of the forensic sketches by Parabon, authorities went to a grand jury in August of 2017 and obtained court orders compelling 11 men to submit their DNA for comparison to the sample from Lisa's crime scene. These men all had a file in the investigation records and had the physical characteristics predicted by Parabon. One of these men was Gary Shara. When Massachusetts state troopers went to Shara's home to inform him that he was now legally obligated to provide them with a sample of his DNA on September 13, 2017. He was not there and they were only able to speak with his roommate. They told the roommate that they had important paperwork to deliver to Gary and left a business card. The next day, Shara's friend came in to see the state troopers. She had discovered 3 handwritten documents Shara had left for her in her apartment. One was a last will and testament, one was a brief note of apology to the Zager family, and the third and longest was an extensive confession to the rape and murder of Lisa Zager. I've never really been or even felt normal. From a very young age, I was fascinated by abduction and bondage. I could never keep it too far from my mind for long. On that fateful day, I let myself do something terrible, he wrote in the letter. I had no intention of killing her when I grabbed her, but events spun out of my control, and in the eyes of the law, it is all the same. I had never regretted anything so much. I was young and headstrong and foolish. Emphasis on that last part. While he admitted to Lisa's murder and to his lengthy fascination with abduction, he said that Lisa was his only victim. I also never did anything of the like again. I hated what happened. I despised myself. I thought of turning myself in 100 of times over the years, but I truly am a coward. He wrote, "Today it will end. I will take my own life or face the music as it were." Shara was still not sure which of these options he would take. He indicated that he knew that once his DNA was analyzed, he would be sent to prison for the rest of his life. As of the writing of the letter, he was unsure if he was strong enough to finally take responsibility for his actions, or if he would take what he described as the coward's way out. Authorities immediately began searching for Chara, both because he was trying to evade them and because they believed he would take his own life rather than face prosecution. Chara's black Honda Civic was ultimately found in the parking lot of Johnson Memorial Medical Center in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, with what appeared to be a suicide note on its dashboard. "To whomever finds my body, I apologize for any psychological trauma incurred. Paul Mass State Police, thank you," it read. Chara had attempted to take his own life by overdosing on Motrin, but had then driven himself to the emergency room. He was taken into custody on September 16th and arraigned as a fugitive from justice prior to his extradition back to Massachusetts. Search warrants for both Chara's apartment and his girlfriend's apartment had been issued and were executed on September 15th. Several items that could be a source of Chara's DNA, including his toothbrush, were collected and tested. His DNA was in fact a match to the DNA from the crime scene. Chara's ex-wife Joyce could not provide further information about why she had initially believed Gary was involved in Lisa's murder because she had passed away in 2014. In court documents related to her divorce from Gary, however, authorities found an allegation by her that Gary had told her he could only have sex with her if he were in control and had a knife to her throat. Speaking to her family members, investigators also learned that Joyce had called her sister the day after Lisa's abduction, concerned by the fact that her husband had come home very late the night before, full of nervous energy and covered in scratches. Chara had also given Joyce a music box featuring a blue carousel horse and told her he had purchased it from Brittany's card shop. He told her a little old lady with gray hair had sold it to him, but the store did not employ anyone matching that description. By the time Chara was arrested, there was no way to confirm if the exact music box had been sold at Brittany's, but former employees did say that it was consistent with the kind of items they sold at the time. Even without Joyce's testimony, prosecutors believed they had a very strong case against Chara thanks to the confession letter and the DNA found at the crime scene. Despite this strong evidence, including his own confession to the crime, Chara still pleaded not guilty to the charges he was facing. Prosecutors and Chara's defense team began preparing for trial. 2 years later, however, Chara appeared in court to make a change in plea. On September 25, 2019, he confirmed to a judge that he was the individual who had murdered Lisa Zager and that he was forever giving up his right to a jury trial. Guilty pleas to a charge of first-degree murder are rare in Massachusetts, as the state has a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for that charge. The district attorney's office would be dropping the kidnapping and aggravated rape charges as the statute of limitations on them had expired. Lisa's family was in the courtroom as Chara was formally sentenced to life in prison without had cared so much for and had never given up on her Lisa. Had cared so much for and had never given up on her Lisa and her relief that her family would not have to go through the further stress of a jury trial. Following the judge's acceptance of Chara's guilty plea, Hampton District Attorney Anthony Gallooni made a statement saying, "It remains tragically true that Lisa will never return to her loving family, but the search for criminal justice ended today with the beginning of Gary Ashara's life sentence in prison. The Zegert family's unbroken faith, strength, and grace over these many years encouraged and inspired me, the many investigators who worked this case, and the public to relentlessly search for the truth. To those many investigators from the Massachusetts State Police, Agawam Police Department, prosecutors from the Hampton District Attorney's Office, and those in the public who never forgot Lisa and believed that justice would someday result. Thank you." 78-year-old John Stewart and his 74-year-old wife, Pansy, were the parents of 3 grown children, a son and 2 daughters, and lived on Foster Drive in Conroe, Texas. They had moved to the property following John's retirement from Mobil Oil. John loved to fish and maintained a garden on his property. He was also in charge of doing the grocery shopping because Pansy no longer drove. The couple attended church every Sunday and always tried to see the best in people and do their best to help them. In August of 1995, John and Pansy fell out of their normal pattern of communication with the rest of their family. John Stewart Jr. thought it was strange when his parents did not answer or return his phone calls for a few days. but was not initially alarmed because the couple regularly visited his sisters in Beaumont, Texas, and he assumed they had just made another trip there. On August 22nd, the couple's nephew, Ron Tullos, concerned that he had not heard from his aunt and uncle, went to their home to check on them. He found both of the cars they owned in the garage. When he went inside the house, kitchen cabinets had been flung open and papers were scattered everywhere. In the living room, he found the body of his uncle. He called the police, who located Pansy's body in another area of the house. Police could not immediately determine the date or cause of the couple's deaths because of the state of their remains. Their autopsies would reveal that they had been shot multiple times and had been dead for about a week. Other evidence, like the most recent newspaper found inside of the house and the stack of mail left in the mailbox, also helped place the date of the murders as August 15, 1995. The Stewart's normal mail carrier knew that they retrieved their mail from the mailbox every day but had been on vacation during the week of the murder, and their substitute did not know to raise the alarm when the mail piled up in the box. The home had been ransacked and several items were missing, including a Rolex watch, numerous pieces of Pansy's jewelry, several guns John had collected for display, and John's metal ring bearing the emblem of his former employer, Mobil Oil. According to the couple's son, John Stewart Jr., they were very trusting and routinely left their doors unlocked despite his objections. Therefore, they may have interrupted a burglary committed at random. However, the tape from their answering machine had also been taken, leading to speculation that they had been killed and robbed by someone who knew them. That individual may have taken the tape because his or her voice was recorded somewhere on it. John Sr. and Pansy had expected their son to one day inherit their property so that it will remain in the family. John Jr. refused to let their wishes go unfulfilled because of the murder, but could not bring himself to live in the house where his parents had been killed. The house was therefore sold and hauled away to a new location. John built a new house and remained on the family property as his parents would have wanted. The Stewart family hired a private investigator, and the case was featured in the local media, but ultimately went cold. In February of 2021, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office launched their new cold case warm-up initiative in partnership with Clear Channel Outdoor. The initiative will post information about cold cases on 32 digital billboards across 5 counties in Texas. A new case will be featured quarterly. The first case highlighted by the initiative was John and Pansy's. Clear Channel Outdoor estimated that the billboards will generate more than 2 million market impressions within the first month they are displayed. Authorities say they have exhausted their leads in the case and hope that the billboards will generate new ones for them to follow up on and hopefully solve the case. "We need closure. My parents need justice," John Stewart Jr. said at the announcement of the new initiative. "I just would like one person to say something that would help us solve this. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries." Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.